You're standing in the center of your village. Every single person you've ever known is watching you. Your family, your friends, the elders who taught you how to hunt, how to survive, how to live. And right now, all of them are looking at you the same way. Like you don't exist. Nobody speaks to you. Nobody looks you in the eye. Nobody hands you food. This isn't a nightmare. This is your punishment. And depending on which tribe, which crime, and which century, this could be the mildest version of what's coming. No prisons, no police, no courts with lawyers and paperwork. So, how did Native American communities actually deal with people who broke the rules? The answer ranges from surprisingly humane to absolutely brutal. And almost none of it works the way Hollywood has taught you to imagine. Let's get into it. Here's the first thing that surprises most people. Native American tribes, across hundreds of distinct nations, generally didn't build prisons. There were no cells, no bars, no long-term lockups. This wasn't a lack of sophistication. It was a completely different philosophy of justice. In a small, tightly knit community where survival depended on every single person contributing. Hunting, gathering, defending, raising children, locking someone away for years, feeding them while they did nothing, made absolutely no practical sense. So instead, most tribal justice systems were built around a different goal entirely: restoring balance to the community as fast as possible. Punishment wasn't just about making someone suffer. It was about repairing harm, deterring future crime, and in many cases, giving the offender a path back into the community. But no prisons did not mean no consequences. In fact, some of what tribes actually did instead was, in its own way, just as feared as a cell. Sometimes more. Let's go back to that opening scene. Public shaming and social exile. This wasn't a minor slap on the wrist. In small, interdependent communities, this could be a genuine death sentence. In many tribes, lesser offenses, minor theft, dishonesty, disrespecting elders, were punished through public shaming. The offender might be called out in front of the entire community, mocked, or deliberately ignored by everyone around them for a set period of time. Sound mild? Picture living in a world with no privacy, no anonymity, where every single person you'll ever interact with, for the rest of your life, just watch you get humiliated, and now refuses to speak to you, trade with you, or help you. In a hunter-gatherer or farming society, where survival depended entirely on cooperation, this kind of isolation could genuinely threaten your ability to eat, to find shelter, to stay safe. For more serious or repeated offenses, shaming escalated into full exile, permanent banishment from the tribe. And exile, in many environments across North America, was almost a death sentence in slow motion. Without the protection of a group, without shared resources, without anyone to help during illness or harsh weather, a banished individual often faced freezing winters, starvation, or vulnerable encounters with rival tribes completely alone. In several documented accounts, exiled individuals were known to wander for months, trying to be accepted into a different tribe. Since survival alone, long-term, was nearly impossible, banishment didn't need violence to be devastating. It simply removed the one thing that kept anyone alive in this world: community. Here's something most people don't expect. Many Native American justice systems were built heavily around restitution, meaning the offender had to directly repay or compensate the victim or their family, rather than simply being punished for punishment's sake. If someone stole property, a common consequence was being forced to return it, often along with additional goods as compensation, extra furs, tools, or food, depending on the tribe and the severity of the theft. In cases of more serious harm, including injury or even death, many tribes, particularly in the eastern woodlands and parts of the Great Plains, practiced a system anthropologists often compare to blood money or wergild, similar in concept to systems found in medieval Europe. A guilty party's family might be required to provide significant compensation to the victim's family: horses, hides, tools, or other valuable goods, as a way of settling the debt and preventing a cycle of revenge killing between families or clans. This system mattered enormously because without it, unresolved violence could spiral into long-term blood feuds between families, something many tribes actively worked to prevent, since internal conflict weakened the entire community against outside threats like rival tribes, harsh winters, or food shortages. Now here's where the story gets darker, because restitution and shaming weren't the only tools available. For serious crimes, several tribes did use physical punishment, and some of it was genuinely severe. Among certain Plains tribes, including documented practices among groups like the Cheyenne, repeated or serious offenses, particularly those that endangered the community, such as theft of essential resources during a harsh season, or repeated violent behavior, could result in corporal punishment. This sometimes included whipping, administered publicly, both as punishment and as a visible warning to others. In some tribes, particularly when dealing with crimes that threatened community survival, such as a hunter scaring away game before a planned communal hunt, jeopardizing the entire group's winter food supply. Punishment could include destruction of the offender's personal property, including their lodge or hunting equipment, as a way of making the consequence match the scale of the harm caused to the group. For the most extreme crimes, premeditated murder within the tribe, repeated betrayal, or actions that put the entire community at serious risk, such as alerting enemies to a tribe's location. The consequence in several documented tribal systems was death. This was typically not framed as torture or spectacle, the way capital punishment sometimes was. In other parts of the world during the same era, in many tribal accounts, it was treated as a final, sober decision, made collectively by elders or community leaders, reserved specifically for situations where exile or restitution simply wasn't enough to protect the rest of the group. In several tribes, especially when guilt was unclear or disputed, justice didn't rely purely on evidence the way modern courts do. Some communities incorporated spiritual or ritual elements into determining guilt. This could involve a respected medicine person or spiritual leader, interpreting signs, dreams, or ritual practices to help identify a guilty party, particularly in cases where no witnesses existed. In some documented traditions, accused individuals were asked to undergo specific tests of endurance or honesty, based on the belief that spiritual forces would reveal the truth through the outcome. While this might sound unusual through a modern lens, it served an important social function. In communities without forensic evidence, fingerprints, or written testimony, these ritual processes provided a way to reach a decision the entire community could accept as legitimate, which mattered enormously for maintaining trust and order within a tightly bonded group. Here's the important distinction that gets lost when people imagine ancient punishment purely through a lens of shock and brutality. Unlike some other historical justice systems around the world, which sometimes used elaborate, prolonged torture as public spectacle and entertainment, most documented Native American punishment systems were oriented around a clear, functional goal: protect the community, repair harm, and deter future crime, using the minimum severity necessary to achieve that. This doesn't mean these systems were gentle. Exile could mean death by exposure or starvation. Corporal punishment was real and painful. Capital punishment, in extreme cases, did happen, but the underlying philosophy was fundamentally different, from systems built around prolonged suffering as the primary goal. It's also critical to remember, practices varied enormously across hundreds of distinct Native nations, each with their own legal traditions, values, and historical context. What applied to one Plains tribe might look completely different from a coastal Pacific Northwest nation or a southwestern Pueblo community. Generalizing too broadly risks flattening that diversity. into an inaccurate, single narrative. So the next time you picture justice without prisons, without police, without courtrooms, don't picture chaos. Picture something far more calculated. Community-based systems built entirely around survival, balance, and consequences that actually fit the crime, refined over countless generations. Without a single written law book, it wasn't lawless. It wasn't soft. And in some ways, it forces an uncomfortable question. Was a punishment system built around community and restoration actually more effective than the one most of the modern world still runs on? If this changed how you think about justice, let me know in the comments. And subscribe for more deep dives into the real history behind how ancient societies actually worked.